Welcome. I'm David DeSerto, Interim Executive Director at the Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen Center for Thought and Culture, the Arts Center of the Archdiocese of New York. I'm glad you're able to be with us today as we engage in conversation with the filmmakers and the subject of the amazing documentary you just viewed, Skid Row Marathon. Before we bring out our special guest, though, I'd love to encourage you to like us on Facebook, to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, and to go ahead and click that bell icon if you'd like updates for future videos that we post. And also, lastly, if you're able to consider making a donation to the Sheen Center so we can continue to bring you meaningful online content like this film and this conversation. So without further ado, it is my pleasure and my distinct privilege to welcome the filmmakers, Gabi and Mark Hayes, and the subject of today's film, LA Superior Court Judge, the Honorable Judge Craig Mitchell.
Hello.
Welcome, Mark. Welcome, Gabi, and welcome, Judge Mitchell.
Thank you, David.
I guess we're at the Sheen Center. We're not supposed to have favorites. We love all the programs we do, but I have to say, this film has had a special place in my heart since it aired, since we showed it at our Justice Film Festival last year. And we were all set to do this event live here in New York at the Sheen Center, but then obviously the pandemic hit, and we had to, for obvious safety reasons, we had to close for public gatherings. But I feel so blessed that we're at least able to gather virtually like this. So let me just start off by asking how everyone's doing. We're here in New York. You're out in LA.
Oh, we're doing actually very good. I mean, It's so nice out. Nice weather, great sunshine as always.
Great to see you again, David. And yeah, what a shame. Really, we're looking so forward to coming back to New York. It's a great facility you have there. What can we do? There's nothing we can do. But hey, it looks good on this software. So we're looking forward to today.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. Not what I would normally be doing in the afternoon in court, so this is a nice diversion. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's start off with an obvious question. You know, Gabi and Mark, you're filmmakers. How did you first learn about Judge Mitchell and his work with the Skid Row Running Club? And then also, when did you realize that this was a story that you wanted to tell cinematically?
Yeah, we actually read an article in a newspaper several years ago, and it was just before the LA Marathon. And Mark and I were looking at each other over coffee and said, this would make a good documentary. Maybe we should check it out. We have done other documentaries more about the Cold War and East-West Germany. And I said, maybe this would be something different. And for us, especially, I'm a runner, so I like the subject matter. And the topic of homelessness was always on our mind. I mean, having lived downtown Los Angeles for several years, we felt, I mean, it seemed such a impossible problem to solve. And we thought maybe it would be worthwhile checking out the judge and his running club and see if there's a story there.
Mark, you were the director of the film. Now, obviously, many of the members that are profiled were struggling with some serious personal circumstances. What was the process of you gaining their trust that allowed you to get them to open up about their personal stories?
Well, honestly, it was pretty difficult because I'm from New York. I have a New York accent. People immediately out here don't trust me, especially people, you know.
It has nothing to do with your accent, Mark.
But Judge, you knew the judge gave us good advice. He said, look, guys, you just can't show up here with a camera. These people are down on their luck, you know, experiencing homelessness, drug addiction. The last thing they want is somebody sticking a camera in their face. So Gabi, like she said, Gabi's a runner. You know, we started running with the group twice a week, 3 times a week, and not just around the block. I mean, we would go 6 miles a pop. I went kicking and screaming, but eventually I got into it. And then slowly but surely, we built up the trust of these guys. and they realized that it wasn't going to be a hit piece. We weren't going to embarrass them. And a lot of the naysayers from the powers that be at the Mission or other places, they were very skeptical of our intentions. But we've outlasted them all. And all of us, we're still down there. Gabi's a great baker, birthday cakes, this and that. You know, we're still very much a part of the community. So to answer the question, I mean, it was tough, but not impossible. I think when they see that you're showing up and really interested in their lives, even after the project is finished, that they know that their trust was not misplaced.
And a point that I want to make, David, as well. People oftentimes, well, it wasn't as hard as it could have been, because people in our club who are trying to overcome addiction, trying to overcome homelessness, I mean, they see themselves as sort of the throwaways of our society. And for Mark and Gabi to say, not only are you not people who should be ignored, but the fight that you are waging to reclaim your life is so important that we need to share that with the larger community. And that point was not lost on our participants. And so when Mark and Gabi wanted to tell their story, a lot of them, you know, said, boy, I find this incredibly affirming. And I think that helped considerably as well.
Wow. You know, hearing you talk in those terms, it reminds me of Pope Francis's whole theology against, you know, what he calls the throwaway culture, about going to the margins and encountering those people on the margins. Obviously, many of the members of the club that were profiled were people who were existing on the margins. Judge Mitchell, it's so apparent in the film of the affection that you have for them and they had for you. Did you have any hesitancy at the beginning about bringing a film crew, or was there sort of a moment where your sort of a protective instinct kicked in?
No, I mean, the film, I think, is as good as it is because Mark and Gabi are who they are as human beings. You know, you don't have to spend much more than 20 minutes with Gabi to understand that she is a deeply compassionate, caring person. A little bit longer with Mark, okay? But, you know, Gabi was out there for a few times, you know, and the folks would talk to her and people would talk to Mark. They established their legitimacy to be there and tell the story quite quickly.
Wow. You know, the stories, and that really makes up the heart of this film, their personal stories. In a recent appearance that you had on the Kelly Clarkson show, you talked about how before you entered your legal career, you were a school teacher for many years. And you were so eloquent in speaking about how your time in the classroom really enabled you to look past stereotypical assumptions about people and to see the true potential at the heart of every human being. How did that experience in the classroom impact both your current roles on the bench and your role as a mentor in the running club?
Me spending 17 years teaching high school in Los Angeles is just something that I draw on every day. My 17 years teaching here in Los Angeles was largely in South Central. I taught at Sarah High School, Catholic high school. Taught at a couple of public high schools. But, you know, again, the student population at Sarah High School, I would say probably at least half of our students were coming out of single parent families. Many of the kids were living in projects. Many of the students had deficiencies in terms of their academic backgrounds. And, you know, but as a Catholic high school, you know, you're compelled to see every student who walks into that room as a divine creation. You know, I would always refer to my students, even when I wanted to quiet them down at the beginning of a class session, you know, children of God, okay, please sit down. We need to focus on the lesson for today. And just that casual phrase, you know, made me understand that I was dealing with a very precious commodity, even if it was rough around the edges.
Wow, that's so beautiful, and it actually leads into a question I was going to ask a little later, but let's get to it now. In the film, your wife Juliet says that at one point you had actually, I guess as a younger man, had discerned, were in the process of discerning a possible vocation as a priest, and she said that you still, to use her phrase, have the heart of a priest. You know, as a Catholic Arts Center, and that we try to infuse all the programming we do with at least some semblance of a sort of a faith focus. Can you share how your Catholic faith has informed your work as a judge, but maybe even more importantly, your ministry as part of this running club?
Well, you don't have to be a biblical scholar to take away from the gospel Jesus's profound love and affinity for everyone. I mean, and oftentimes for those who are, as you referenced earlier, at the margins, or broken people. You know, be it the Roman centurion, be it Mary Magdalene, you know, pick your Bible character. People who were repudiated, looked down upon, etc. Christ had a special affinity for those individuals. And, you know, it always struck me that if I was going to be true to the faith that I proclaimed, then I had to be true to that larger reality. And so in terms of dealing with people on Skid Row in the running club, or dealing with people who are accused of very serious crimes in my courtroom, you know, I am still, I don't care if you're accused of a sex crime, if you're accused of murder, you are still, in terms of my religious perspective, you are still a child of God. And I try not to lose sight of that fact.
That's wonderful. Gabi, Mark, as filmmakers of faith, how do you bring your faith into the craft of filmmaking, specifically in the world of documentaries, where you're dealing with real life subjects?
Well, I would first start by saying that when we started our project, we had seen this. We needed help. We knew we needed help. We made shorter documentaries, as Gabi mentioned, about Cold War subjects. We saw this film, and we approached this filmmaker, and we told him the story that we wanted to do, the story about this judge, the running club on Skid Row. Guy says, I'll help you, no problem. We did the first interviews at the courthouse with this guy, Dana, his name was. Then we needed a more permanent cameraman, a guy named James Stoltz. He said, I'll help you. I have some time on my hands, after we told him the story about the judge helping people on Skid Row. The sound guy, he said he'll help us. Only years later did it click in my head. Everybody was Catholic. Dana was a Catholic. The judge is a Catholic. We're Catholics. My dad used to think Gabi was a communist because she was from East Germany. Everybody, it just was a total coincidence that everybody happened to be Catholic. So just what does that tell you? It just says that I think that we're all drawn, the thing that we're drawn to is you want to be of service, you want to help, you want to try to do something. So I don't know if it's Catholic per se, because it's not a religious film at all, but I think that all of us, and the fact that it's resonating with the audience at the Sheen Center, it just tells you something, that there's something about what the judge is doing. He's giving of himself, that you grow up with that belief that you need to help. So what a crazy coincidence, really.
Yes.
3-4 years later, I said, God, everybody's Catholic. So
people will help us along the way after.
Yeah.
Well, we'll circle back to that conversation because I want to dig a little deeper on that. But sort of another aspect that comes out in the film, Judge Mitchell, and I'll pose this question to all three of you. Judge, in the film, you talk so lovingly about the formative role that your mother played. And at one point, you recall a childhood memory of your mom taking you and I believe your sister to the site of the Watts riots, and how later in the film your own son talks about how when he was graduating 8th grade, part of the advice
from college.
He was graduating, but he was talking about a story.
Oh yes, absolutely, you're right.
About when he had graduated 8th grade. You had given him some advice, and I'm paraphrasing here. Basically, in moments of great moral crisis, you can't stand on the sidelines. Obviously, we find ourselves as a country right now in the midst of multiple crises. Do you think, from your respective perspectives, that a film like this that really encourages small gestures of kindness, about extending yourself to others, even if those others come from different backgrounds, different points of view, that idea of those small acts, that small extension of self, is really a critical part of the healing solution?
I think so many of the challenges we face as a country, are not going to be solved by legislation passed by Congress or state legislatures. I mean, of course, what we're dealing with right now is trying to address the systemic racism that has been a part of the American fabric since the very foundation of this country. And you cannot legislate racism out of existence. It has to be something that is addressed internally by each person. And how do you combat racism in a meaningful manner in that level? You experience people who are of different backgrounds and ethnicities. I think racism would be dealt almost a death blow if every American could say, okay, X number of hours I have X number of very meaningful relationships with people who are very different from me. In terms of the running club, we have people from all different religions, all different ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds. And the wonderful thing is, when you share a common experience, you prepare for a marathon, you share meals together, those superficial differences become absolutely meaningless in terms of being an impediment to good, solid relationships. That's one of the takeaways that I hope people take away from watching this.
Gabi and Mark, any thoughts?
I mean, for me, especially growing up in East Germany, everybody was in the same boat, and we couldn't travel, we couldn't read what we wanted, and but the only thing we had was the human contact and the human relationships. And this meant a lot to us. We would help each other. We would, exchange goods. We didn't have money that we could use, but the relationships were the most important parts of our lives. And that coming now to Skid Row, to Los Angeles, where the perception of, rich and poor and phony and honest, the whole differences we have here, having relationships with people that are real, mean to me a lot. And I could see, and I know Mark probably too, you could see those people that are on Skid Row and that we followed, that they're real. And that really brought me back to my roots to make this film and to finish it.
And I would just say also, I mean, I agree with what everybody's saying. And Judge, when you're talking about the systemic racism and all the movements, Black Lives Matter, what's going on, it's heart-wrenching. But I think at the end of the day also that we think it's so important to be part of what's going on. You know, we African Americans are way overrepresented down on Skid Row, but we're down there. We try to volunteer to try to serve lunch, and we do it very quietly. We don't make a big deal about it. I mean, now, excuse me, but you know what I mean? It's not about a bumper sticker or saying this or that. We're down there. We're down there, and we're giving our time. The judge is down there 3 times a week. More.
No, I absolutely agree, Mark. And, you know, it's one thing to, you know, make certain representations orally to try and toe the critically correct line. It is a very different and far more impactful thing if Craig Mitchell, with a Welsh-Irish background, to go down onto Skid Row and say, okay, for 3 days a week, you're going to have my undivided attention. If you call me up at midnight, I'm going to answer the phone and respond to a crisis that you bring before me. I'm going to do my best to take you to some incredible place around the world. On a 20-mile run, I'm going to talk to you about what it means to deal with family issues. You know, that's where people understand if you're really genuine or not.
Yeah, and where actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
You know, that we try to take real action. We're done with the project, but we still go. And at the end of the day, we're doing it for ourselves. You know what I mean? We feel good about what we're doing. We need the contact. We need the relationships and the friendships.
Well, it's certainly apparent in the film that, you know, you as the filmmakers and certainly you, Judge Mitchell, get as much out of these relationships as you ever give. We actually have a question from one of our viewers, and it's for the judge. This viewer says that obviously your compassion and humanity are evident, and the question is, does your compassionate sense translate to your work on the bench in the sense of that feeling spreading to fellow judges and affecting maybe how they sentence? Do you feel that you have also impacted just by the way that you model your compassion and your humanity, that it has affected some of your fellow judges?
I think it has. I mean, certainly the limited feedback that I receive from some of my colleagues would suggest that what I am doing on Skid Row is something that they've thought long and hard about. It certainly informs what I do on the bench. You know, are there some people that need to be permanently removed from our community because they pose simply too great of a risk of harming others? Yes. I mean, that's the really hard thing to do as a judge, is to say, you know, while this person may be a child of God, this person has had such a chaotic upbringing. This person has had such little guidance. This person has been influenced by so many negative influences that at this point, their ability to act humanely towards others is horribly compromised. And it's something that weighs upon me. I struggle to deal with. On the other hand, there are countless situations where a defendant will come in front of me and I'll look at their criminal history and I see a common thread being drugs or abuse as a child. And you go, okay, is there something short of locking this person up for a long time that the criminal justice system can do? And I think that's what our society is clamoring for at this point in time when they're talking about criminal justice reform. Luckily, in the state of California, you know, we're finally understanding that the solution is not always impose a longer sentence. Maybe there needs to be some other meaningful intervention. And so in Los Angeles, we have mental health court, we have veterans court, we have drug court, we have a whole host of options short of locking someone up that hopefully will allow that person to get back on a positive footing.
Wow. Yeah, that struggle that you speak about and that conflict is evident even from the first scene where you're reading out the sentence to the young man and he's breaking down in tears. and it called to mind the quote from St. Thomas Aquinas that mercy without justice is the mother of dissolution, but justice without mercy is cruelty. And I guess you really have to try to balance those two. It goes back to St. Paul talking about the law and grace, and both seem, worlds that you have to have one foot in.
And I want to point out, David, that the sentence that I imposed on Davon Williams in those opening scenes, that was the statutory minimum that the state of California would allow me to impose. I begged the prosecutor in that particular case to honor their initial offer of a 15-year sentence to Davon Williams, because that was fair. That was just for what he did. And I want to point out, in that shooting that took place, Davon Williams didn't fire a single shot. And even his other gang companions, nobody could shoot straight. Nobody was hurt. And to send somebody to prison for 73 years to life when no one even gets hurt, and this particular defendant never fires a single shot, I find that troubling today, as much today as I do back when I sentenced Davon.
Well, it's you could certainly see that that emotional conflict, even in that scene. So many of the lessons that you talk about with the running club, whether it be focus or discipline or commitment to just showing up, the phrase you used before, are so applicable just to life in general. Can you talk about the lessons that you've all learned as runners at one time or another, about how those life lessons are not only important for your running, but just for life in general?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole showing up thing, Ben Shirley, just show up, things will happen. If you never get out there, I oftentimes encourage people to go to church. How can you tell me you don't want to go to church? You don't even know what's going to happen at church. Okay, maybe this particular Sunday, the priest is going to have something that speaks personally to you. You don't know. The discipline. I mean, who would get a 4-year degree? Who would get an advanced degree if you didn't learn how to deal with setbacks and disappointments and taking classes that you didn't particularly enjoy? Not every run is enjoyable. Much about long distance running, it's not fun at all. But if you commit to accepting that, then of course, on marathon day, you're having just an incredible experience. And you're, once a year with the Skid Row Running Club, you're getting aboard a plane and you're going to Jerusalem, you're going to Vietnam. We just got back this past year running in the Amazon and took the runners for a week in the Galapagos Islands. That's worth a long-term commitment.
Wow. I have to ask, that's a perfect jumping off point. In the film, towards the end, after you've run the marathon in Rome, I felt it was the most powerful moment in a film with many powerful moments. You recount an anecdote from Pope Francis, where you talk about that he had, when he was bishop down in Buenos Aires, had brought several of members of his flock to the ocean because they had never seen it before, and it was really a way to just tell them that they had dignity. And you said that everything that you do, whether it's the running club or these trips that you arrange for the members to go on, is in some small way just trying to let them know and affirm their dignity as human beings. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I have a question aligned with that for the filmmakers. Before you do, I just want to be respectful of time. We're coming up at the 30-minute mark. Could we just go for maybe another 10, 15 minutes? Or is that okay?
No, that's fine.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Great. So, Judge, if you could respond first, and then I just want to tweak that question slightly for you, Mark and Gabi.
Okay.
Integral to the definition of giving another person dignity is to impart a sense of self-worth. And for the Skid Row Running Club to be able to tell a person who is not long past heavy drug use, who has been sleeping on the sidewalk, that you are of such worth that we're going to have anonymous donors give of their own resources so that you can have a life-changing experience halfway around the world. You know, that sends an incredibly powerful message to our runners, that you are worthy, that there is a dignity in you as a human being that needs to be acknowledged. And, you know, one of the moments when we took our runners to Jerusalem, and then we took them to Petra in Jordan following our experience in Jerusalem, they stood on the Valley of Moses, Wadi Musa, and they overlooked the valley, and at the far edge of the valley, you could see Aaron's tomb on a hilltop. And many of our runners, they watched the sunset, they were in tears because it gave them a sense of their worth, that people that they didn't even know wanted them, valued them to the extent that they were to have this experience.
That's it gets chills just listening to that story. And isn't that the heart of the whole Christian message, that every human being is infinitely valuable? Mark and Gabi, staying on that topic of the dignity of the person, Pope Pius XII had written an exhortation that is commonly referred to now as the ideal film. And it was addressed to members of the Italian cinema community. And in it, he outlined his thoughts on what he felt would be the criteria for an ideal film. And it's a wonderful document to read. But if you want to boil it down to its essence, it talks about a film is ideal if it affirms the dignity of the human person, made and created in the image and likeness of God, and also affirms the ability of the human person to keep getting up and to keep returning to the right path no matter how many times they fall. That seems like that is really so essential to the message of this film. Even your tagline is redemption one step at a time. The idea of not only second chances, but in some cases, second, third, and fourth chances. Can you talk a little bit about how you approach this and the stories that you tell from that lens?
Yeah, you're right, and it reminds me of a scene in Rome. This was not in the film, but Rebecca, one of the runners, the day of the Rome Marathon, it rained cats and dogs. Everything was going wrong. People didn't feel good. I bumped into her at about mile 6, and she said, Mark, she was screaming, can you lend me 20 euros? I said, yeah, sure. Everything okay? She goes, I need a pack of cigarettes and a pizza. I promise I'll pay you back the money. I said, okay, sure. But she went, she had a couple of Camel Lights, I think she bought. She had some pizza, left it there, finished the marathon. So it's this whole journey, it's not a straight shot. You know what I mean? You're, like you were saying, you're going to fall down. We saw so many relapses. I mean, it wasn't even funny, but that the road to the finish line is not a straight line. It's not, you know, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be disappointments. But what we really learned, I mean, especially Gabi too, so many times we thought of quitting.
Yes.
If they can finish, if Rebecca could finish that marathon with a bum knee, feeling lousy, had to have a smoke, had to have some pizza, and then finished 26.2 miles, we would always tell ourselves, if she can do it, we can do it. So
that's what we really learned. I mean, we had many challenges. I mean, financing the documentary. Filming. First, at the beginning, we had crews, we had people that helped us. Then later on, I mean, it was just Mark and myself. And, you know, following that through over 4.5 years, it was quite a challenge. And then we came to a point and said, how can we pay for all this? Editing, color correction, sound mixing. And, you know, we always find a way. It's just like, you have to keep pushing. It's worth telling the story. And at the end, it all came together. But it was just not easy at all.
Well, the film was a marathon in itself.
Yes.
Well, obviously, this film was filmed several years ago, and we now find ourselves in this ongoing pandemic. I was talking with the judge before the stream went live that it was so wonderful to hear that so many of these stories, people were able to get their lives back on the right track. But I assume many of the members, particularly many of the residents of the Midnight Mission, are still in a very precarious situation. And I'm sure that's only made infinitely more complex because of the pandemic,
Right.
dealing with homelessness and recovery. Do you still keep in touch with many of these people and, without getting into, personal information, or is everyone still doing okay? Or
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're doing all
We
good.
see Ben all the time. We just heard from Ben.
Yeah.
Ben is an active musician, and he's employed writing classical music. Rebecca is working at a hospital in a maternity ward in Seattle, a fine hospital.
We see Raphael.
Raphael's doing great. We see Raphael maybe even more than we want to. He comes by like unexpectedly. He'll say like, "Let's eat. Let's do something." So everybody's doing pretty good. But I mean, some of the people that we followed, they're having a difficult time. Judge Wright with David. What's the latest with David? We haven't seen David lately. He was the painter in the film.
David is back in the mission. Okay. David entered into a relationship, and that relationship was problematic. He picked up another criminal offense, and it really set him back. And so his original employment came to an end. He encountered some financial difficulties, and so he's sort of back at square one.
Yeah.
Luckily, he's not using again. But and I just think over the weekend, who did I hear from? I heard from Jerry. I heard from Dominic. Dominic has been a work in progress for the last 7 years. Dominic can't find his way to sobriety, at this point, to save his life. And to those people who are, in a different experiential area, methamphetamine is the drug of choice in Los Angeles. And one thing I have learned is methamphetamine is an incredibly difficult drug to separate yourself from. It gives you an incredibly good high. It is cheap. Of course, it destroys your brain. But, I have really gained an appreciation of the struggle that is confronting people who are addicted. And, otherwise, I, as a judge, I would have an academic understanding of it. But boy, when I can put a name to it, when I can tell a particular run on a particular runner on a particular day, you can't run with us today because I can tell that you're high. And since you're high, you're likely to engage in conduct that is going to endanger your own safety. And that's an understanding on a completely different level.
Yeah. And you were saying also, Judge, that part of the layer of complexity with the pandemic and the quarantine is that so many of the individuals that you run with and care about, that sense of community is so important to sort of keeping them on the right path, that these necessary quarantine protocols have just added another challenge to that recovery.
It does. I mean, you go to any 12-step AA meeting, of course, you're going to listen to speakers and they're going to give testimonials. But what is equally powerful in terms of a person being able to maintain their sobriety is just the people that you are around. To be in a room with other people, laughing, sharing stories. What are you going to be doing tomorrow? How is work going? All those mundane conversations. They're not mundane if you are an isolated, recovering drug addict. They are human connections that this person is talking to me and sharing what's going on in their life, and that communicates a sense of value to me. And, in this age of quarantine and virtual meetings, it's really far less efficacious than the in-person interaction.
And Judge, we didn't really talk about the fact that I'm not a runner. Gabi's a runner, marathon runner. The Judge, of course, the Judge run how many marathons, Judge? 70 marathons?
78.
Thereabouts.
I came to this whole thing not a runner. I don't enjoy running, but I have to say, doing the morning runs, we would go 6 miles at daybreak. We start in the dark, we finish, and the sun is rising. After like the third or fourth time, you start saying, "Wow, this is pretty good. I feel good." And we'd go for a little breakfast, maybe bring some of the runners with us. We'd go have some coffee and bacon and eggs. This is a big thing also, where when you're running in a group, there's just this dynamic that this group has. And look, I hope I didn't give the impression like this is a Catholic project. Many of the people are not Catholic, but they're all coming together, people who are not addicts, who are not homeless, and they come and they get up early, and we meet at 5:45 in the morning, and they're there just to be a part of this club that the Judge has started, that there's something good about it. And there's a certain peer pressure that I think helps people stay clean. I want to run the next time because they shame me into it. They make fun of me because I'm not running, and it's all in good fun. But there's this little dynamic of being part of a group that helps you stay clean and sober. I would imagine. I don't know what that's like, but this is a part that the Judge has brought with his club, that it just happens to really work with people that are suffering from addiction.
Yeah, it really.
And it doesn't matter what religion. It can be any religion, any culture.
Well, it seems far less in a club than a family. I mean, watching the film, it almost seems like it's a family. Well, I could keep talking with the three of you, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time and the generosity of time that you've showed us. And maybe if we can get together again at some point, we can. I can ask you about the story of Mark, you and Gabi meeting in East Germany, because I know that's a wonderful story in itself, which you told me when you were at the Sheen Center. That's a conversation unto itself. But maybe before we sign off, if we could just let people know who may be interested in supporting in whatever way, how people can support the Skid Row Runners Club, and how people can have access to the film in case they want to watch it again, or maybe have some sort of a group screening. So maybe we'll start with you, Judge, about how people can help the Runners Club, and then Gabi and Mark tell us about how they can access the film.
Mark and Gabi?
Yeah, well, so people can donate. SkidRowRunningClub.com. SkidRowRunningClub.com. It's easy to remember. And they take donations. It's a 501c tax-free nonprofit. So people can donate there.
And then, people have seen the film, and they raised quite some substantial money for the Skid Row Running Club. And so it doesn't fall on the Judge's shoulders anymore that he has to pay out of his own pocket.
He has kids.
And if you want to see the film, you can stream it on Amazon Prime or on Vimeo or on Google Play. Or you can also buy a DVD.
If somebody who's watching this and they're connected to the Sheen Center, we will send them a DVD if they want one. No problem. Free. No cost.
Just email us to skidrowmarathon@gmail.com.
Yeah, that's Gabi.
And our website is skidrowmarathon.com, and all the information is on there.
But people, if they have Amazon Prime, it's free anyway. It's included. But if people want to see it, we will make it available to them at no cost. No problem.
Wow.
We love the Sheen Center. We admire what you're doing. And coincidentally, where you're located, right on the Bowery, that was like one of the original Skid Rows, the Bowery. When I remember when I was a kid, we would drive down the Bowery, and it's changed so much. So you see, change is possible. But you're right down the street from the Bowery.
Yep, absolutely. It's a different neighborhood now. No more Bowery boys like in the old movies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I just end by saying that the metaphor for running is just woven throughout Scripture, and one of my favorites is in St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews, where he says, "Run the race with endurance or perseverance," depending on which translation you're using. I would just want to thank the three of you for running the important race of your life, not just with endurance or perseverance, but with dignity, with class, with empathy and humanity, with faith and hope, but most of all with such genuine compassion. So I want to thank the three of you. And it is, to say an honor, is to put it lightly. It has been a blessing and an inspiration to spend this time and just to share with you. So thank you very much. Continued blessings on your ministry of film and your ministry of justice, Judge, and best of luck with the Runners Club. And hopefully at some point we will be able to gather together in person.
Yeah.
I have a dream, actually. One of the things that all of our runners are clamoring for, they always ask me, Judge, is there any way we as a club could run the New York City Marathon together?
Oh,
So
wow.
if there is anybody listening that might be able to effectuate that, you would have our eternal gratitude.
Well, I hope there's someone out there listening. I know that this year, I believe it's been canceled, but hopefully next year. And if you do, the door to the Sheen Center is always open, and let's get together. I would love to meet you in person.
That would be great.
Yeah, we'd love to come back.
Thank you. We loved having you the first time. So
thank you, David. Thanks very much.
Oh, no,
Thank
thank
you.
you all very much. And thanks to our viewers. Thank you for tuning in today on Facebook or YouTube. Again, we encourage you to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click that bell icon if you want notifications. Justice Film Festival. We premiered this film last year. This year, the Justice Film Festival obviously will look a little bit different. It will be a virtual film festival, but I'm sure the films will be, just as top-notch as ever. And the guests and conversations we will have. So thank you very much. Again, encourage you, if you're able to make a donation to the Sheen Center. We love bringing you content like this, infused with faith, hope, and love, but we can't do it by ourselves. As Gabi, Mark, and the judge said, it takes a community. It takes us all running together. So please, if you can, we appreciate it. No matter how big or small, the donation will be deeply appreciated. Until next time, stay safe, be well, God bless.